If the author of the essay would manage the argument to purpose against the conduct of the Associate Presbytery, he must prove that when the major part of the office-bearers of a church refuse obedience to such positive divine commands as are above expressed, that the unfaithfulness of the majority binds up the lesser part, who are sensible of their duty, from the faithful discharge of the same. Or, which is to the same purpose, he must prove that when the judicatories of a church in their judicative capacity, instead of maintaining and supporting the truth, refuse to condemn dangerous errors when brought to their bar, and when, instead of vindicating and asserting the liberties and freedom of the members of the church, they wreath a yoke of bondage about their necks, which I have already proven is the case with the present judicatories, that, notwithstanding of this, the smaller part who are sensible of their duty ought to remain in communion and conjunction with them, and that they ought not to associate by themselves to assent the liberties wherewith Christ hath made his people free, and to maintain a testimony for the truth in opposition to error, though office-bearers are given to the church, and ecclesiastical courts are instituted and appointed, for these and the like valuable ends and purposes. Or, to express in a few words, the author of the essay, under the pain of losing all his specious arguments from the churches of Galatia and Corinth, must prove the following proposition, that is, that when the majority of an ecclesiastic body continue to disobey the express commands of the head of the church, the minority are thereby well warranted to disobey said commands for the sake of peace and to maintain union with the majority. But this I judge he will not be able to reconcile to the Scriptures of truth, nor will it agree with his own declared principle in the essay, page 36, that we are not to keep up union with the church at the expense of the least sin. I might, in like manner, prove the divine right and warrant that is pled for, from the reproofs and admonitions, from the commands and directions that are given in the several apostolic epistles to the church to whom they are directed, to the churches to whom they are directed, But I shall not further insist upon this. I refer the reader to the printed letter, for what I have observed upon the cases of the churches of Thyatira and Pergamos, and on the reproofs and directions that are given them, I hope, from what is now said, it may be evident that when the conduct of the present judicatories of this national church is seriously considered, the Associate Presbytery have divine right and warrant for the steps that they have taken, and particularly for their emitting a judicial act and testimony to the doctrine, worship, government, and discipline of our Lord's house, and against the several defections, both of the present and former times, from the same. I shall only here subjoin the words of the Apostle in Colossians 2, verse 2, that their hearts might be comforted, being knit together in true love, to the acknowledgement of the mystery of God and of the Father and of Christ. From these words I observe that there can be no true fellowship without love, and church members, whether office-bearers or others, cannot be knit together in love where offense is daily given, and the matter and ground of offense is obstinately persisted in and justified, notwithstanding of the most dutiful representations against the same. I further observe that the members of the church ought to be knit together to the acknowledgement of the mystery of God. How then can we have ecclesiastical union in conjunction with judicatories that refuse to acknowledge and confess many great and important truths in opposition unto the many pernicious errors by which they are subverted? Fourthly, when the conduct of the present judicatories is considered, the laudable acts and constitutions of this church warrant our secession from them, and our association together for displaying the banner of a judicial testimony for truth. The duties pointed out unto us from the acts and constitutions of this Reformed Church are summed up in our covenants, national and solemn league. In the national covenant we swear that we, quote, shall continue in the obedience of the doctrine and discipline of this kirk, and shall defend the same according to our vocation and power all the days of our lives, unquote. And in the bond subjoined in 1638, whereby the covenant was sworn with the accommodation to their then circumstances, we swear that we shall, quote, continue in the profession and obedience of the foresaid religion, and that we shall defend the same and resist all these contrary errors and corruptions, according to our vocation and to the utmost of that power that God hath put into our hands all the days of our life, unquote. And also in the first article of our solemn league we swear, quote, that we shall sincerely, really, and constantly, through the grace of God, endeavor in our several places and callings, the preservation of the Reformed religion in the Church of Scotland in doctrine, worship, discipline, and government against our common enemies, unquote. And in the sixth article we swear, quote, that we shall not suffer ourselves directly nor indirectly to be divided and withdrawn, unquote, from our covenant union and conjunction, quote, either by making defection to the contrary part, or by giving ourselves to a detestable indifferency and neutrality in this cause." Unquote. Can we, in a consistency with our covenant union and conjunction, maintain a conjunction with the present judicatories who are carrying on a course of defection to the contrary part? Can we, without giving up ourselves to a detestable indifferency and neutrality in the cause of God, see error lifting up its head without any suitable testimony against it? And can we see the heritage of God scattered and broken without using our endeavors for affording relief to the Lord's oppressed people? Do we, in our places and callings, preserve our Reformed doctrine, government, and discipline? Do we defend the same against all contrary errors and corruptions, according to our vocations and the utmost of that power that God has put into our hands? If we shall be witnesses to the injury that is done to truth, if we shall see any of the rights of the Redeemer's spiritual kingdom invaded, and his subjects spoiled of their rights and privileges, and yet in the meantime shall not use that power which is put into our hands, and which we have a right to use according to our several places and callings, namely, of lifting up a judicial testimony for truth, and for the rights and privileges of the subjects of the Redeemer's kingdom, and therefore I humbly judge that we have right and warrant to associate together in distinct judicatories from the present, who are carrying on a course of defection, that we may thereby endeavor not only to answer the end and design of the institution of ecclesiastical courts in the New Testament Church, but that we may also do what in us lies to persecute the ends of our solemn covenant engagements. Fifthly, all the ministers of this church, when they are ordained to the office of the holy ministry, solemnly promise and engage, quote, that they shall firmly and closely adhere to the doctrine contained in our confession of faith, and likewise that they shall, to the utmost of their power, in their station, assert, maintain, and defend the said doctrine, worship, discipline, and government, etc. Unquote. But the present judicatories, as has been made evident, refuse to assert, maintain, and defend the doctrines contained in our confession of faith, in opposition unto many errors subversive of the same that have been brought to their bar, and instead of maintaining and defending our Presbyterian government and discipline, they pursue such measures as have an evident tendency to overthrow the same, as has likewise been made evident in several particular instances. Therefore, such who are sensible of their duty as office-bearers of the church, and of the solemn engagements that they have come under, that they shall, to the utmost of their power in their station, assert, maintain, and defend the doctrine contained in our confession of faith, etc., have right and warrant from the acts and constitutions of this church to associate together for the exercise of the keys of government and discipline, that they may assert and maintain in a judicial capacity the doctrine contained in our confession of faith and our Presbyterian church government and discipline, and consequently the associate presbytery in their judicial act and testimony, and in their several proceedings thereupon, are endeavoring to pay their vows unto the Lord, and to fulfill the engagements that they came under when they were ordained to the office of the holy ministry. I shall only further observe upon this head that all the ministers of this church do solemnly engage themselves, and also sign it with their hand, that they shall never endeavor directly nor indirectly the prejudice or subversion of the foresaid doctrine, worship, government, and discipline. I submit it to the judgment of such as are not quite prejudiced, if the present judicatories are fulfilling this solemn engagement, or rather if the whole of their management with respect to the doctrinal errors that have been brought to their bar is not directly to the prejudice of the doctrines contained in our excellent confession of faith, as likewise if their conduct with respect to the many instances I have given of tyranny in the administration is not directly to the prejudice of our Presbyterian church government and discipline, and consequently if they are not guilty of the violation of the foresaid solemn engagements that they have come under, when ordained to the office of the holy ministry. When all these things are impartially considered, they are sufficient to justify the conduct of the associate presbytery, and to evidence that they have right and warrant from the laudable acts and constitutions of the Church of Scotland to depart from ecclesiastical communion in conjunction with the present judicatories, and to associate together for asserting judicially the truths that are opposed and subverted, and for endeavoring in the said capacity the relief of the broken and oppressed heritage of God through the land.